Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in the southeast corner of Scotland. Scotland, the greatest nation on earth, the greatest everything, basically. And I'm particularly excited because in the key rugby union clash between Scotland and Australia at Murrayfield in Edinburgh, we beat Australia. Australia are one of the greatest rugby union sides in the world, and we beat them very convincingly and finished basically the autumn season pretty much undefeated on a bit of a winning streak. So I am a very happy Scot at the moment. Was very tempted to actually change the start screen, the intro screen, to a Scotland flag to celebrate, but I won't, because this is a music channel, it's not a sports channel or anything like that. So anyway, I hope everybody is doing well and has had a great weekend. As you can tell, I have had a terrific weekend. The rugby was extremely good and extremely exciting, so it was great fun to watch. So let's see who is here. And first in the door was Billy Morgan, as per usual, because he is always waiting with his finger hovering over that mouse, ready for when he gets that notification. So good on him. And we got the W5 family here as well. We got Stephen Wilson, we got Tony Stringer, we've got Alien Intelligence Agency. Now that is a great name for a channel, for sure. And I think you're new to my channel, so welcome to you. I'm glad you're here. And we have Dwayne. We've got Rock Tees down in New Zealand, who says it's the safest place on planet Earth, except when your local volcanoes decide to erupt. We got Sean Aaron here. We got Bobby Booth. We got Rich Cresswell. We got Cal Tragizia. We got my dear old friend Papa Raptor Music here, who says happy joy. We've got to have joy in the house, absolutely. And we got Keith from Radio Top Trumpet, and I think I've already mentioned Sean Aaron is here, and Just Bob is here as well. Awesome. And Paul Morgan, welcome back, Paul. Good to see you, buddy. And Danny Taylor, our songwriting contest winner from Halloween, is here. And I think I've reached the bottom of the chat so far. We got 22 people here, which is awesome. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I appreciate you all immensely. If you have not hit that like button, please do. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please be subscribed, because you won't be able to engage in the chat if you don't. So please do hit that subscribe button, and wait a couple of minutes and the chat will be unlocked to you, and then you will be able to ask questions. If you have a question for me, please do type at Jonny Lipsham Studios to start your question, because that highlights my name in red and it makes it easy for me to pick out questions if you do that. If you don't, I'm not going to see it, or I'm less likely to see it. More accurately, I'm less likely to see it. And that helps me out a lot. It enables me to be able to pick out questions from just the general conversation which is happening in the chat, which I like. I like you guys having a good chat there. 24 people here already, which is frickin' awesome. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. All right, so Rock Tease actually does have a question, although he did not type the at Jonny Lipsham Studios properly, but that's okay. I'll still take the question. Oh, I was about to, but he deleted the question. So I can't actually ask the question now, but I answer the question. No, I can't, because photographic memory. I can remember what he asked. And that was to do with the IQ, or input quantize button in the top menu of Studio One. So we will cover this. We will be using Studio One Pro 7, but what I show you in Studio One Pro 7 still applies to Studio One version 6. And it also still applies to version 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 as well, because input quantize has been around since version 2. So, and the feature itself, though has been improved, is largely unchanged. So what does input quantize do? Input quantize enables you to play your MIDI in to Studio One and for it to follow the quantize set in the toolbar at the top. Now, you can also set the input quantize in the note editor as well. And you can also set it in the record panel. So you can turn on input quantize from the record panel. I'm going to show you all of this, so don't panic. So let's open up Studio One. I'm going to get a brand new song open. I'll show the screen in just a second. There we go. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab an instrument, and I think I will use Lead Architect for this. And we'll grab something that has let's maybe have something that has like some arpeggio to it. So we could just go. So actually, on second thoughts, I'm just going to use something that doesn't have that, because I want something that is just going to sustain. So let's say I want to play a pattern into Studio One very much like that. I can set this quantize value to 16th notes at, let's say, 80 beats a minute. So let's set that to 80, and we'll put our metronome on, and we'll get the old pre-count in there. And we'll leave everything else set as it is. And I'm just going to make sure that's the right tempo. And that's pretty much exactly the right tempo, except it's extremely quiet. So let's go and grab this guy and turn it up a wee bit. Actually, that's way too loud. Let's turn it back down a bit. All right, so let's go with that. And I don't want this color. I'll go for that color instead. So if we have the IQ button pressed, what that's going to do is that's going to make everything that I do quantize to 16th notes as I actually play them. All right, so let's say that's what I want to do, but I want it to be really precise 16ths, and I don't want to have to quantize after the fact. So yeah, it took me a minute there to get into the groove. As you can see, we can pretty much dispense with like the first two measures of that, because it was pretty awful. So, you notice straight away, the first problem with input quantize is even though input quantize moves stuff so that what you play in is locked to the grid, it can also put those notes not where you actually want them. Because here's what quantizing does, and I think people either they don't know this or they have forgotten what quantizing does. What quantizing does, it's like applying I don't have any hair, so this is a poor illustration, but if I were to have more hair than I have, it's like applying a hair comb to your hair and moving your hair into a particular style, a particular direction. So what it does is it moves the notes that you have played to the nearest grid value that you have set. So in this case, 16th notes. So as you noticed, with those first couple of measures where I didn't play particularly tidily, the quantizing isn't really sure which 16th note to move them to. So it moves them to the nearest one. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is where you want it, because Studio One doesn't know what you want because it can't read your mind. So what it does do is it just applies a filter to move everything to the nearest 16th note. So if you play something very, very early, then it might move it to a 16th note back. If you play something very, very late, it might move it to a 16th note ahead, or a 16th note late. And that might not be what you actually want. So even with input quantize on, you are still going to have to do some editing because it's not a magic solution that makes everything perfect. It doesn't do that. All it does is just apply a filter like a hair comb and it moves everything to the nearest grid value. And so if you've played something, like I said, a fraction early, then it'll move it to that nearest grid value. If you played it like literally right in between two 16th notes, then it's going to have to decide which one it is nearest to, and it will basically look at where the note on message starts. So it will then go, okay, so by this particular position, it is very, very slightly nearer to this 16th note than it is to this one. So it will move the note to that 16th note rather than this one, even if this one is the one you want. So that's kind of how quantizing works in general. It's a filter. So even if you were to quantize everything after the fact, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to move things to where you want it to. Most of the time, that's what will happen, but not every time. So input quantize basically just does the quantizing as you perform. And so when you stop performing, everything is then immediately quantized. Does it mean it's going to be perfect? No, it doesn't. As you notice with that first couple of measures, it didn't know where to put some of my notes, and some of them were together because it just moved. It was just like, okay, so that one is nearest this note, that one's nearest this note. They ended up on the same 16th note, which was not what I actually played. So here's the thing, I'm not perfect. My timing isn't spot on. And nobody's is. Nobody is literally metronomic and doesn't need any quantizing. Nobody is. And so there is this mythology that says that quantizing is the fix-all for anything that's out of time. And so what people do is they just quantize de facto. It's like an impulse response. They will hit Q. They'll hit Control A or Command A to select all, then hit Q. And they go, okay, great. And they move on. Unfortunately, what quantizing does is it moves everything to the grid. And for the style of music you're working in, that might not be what you want. If you're working in pop, to the grid, modern pop, to the grid is definitely what you want. If you work in industrial music, like industrial metal, to the grid is what you want. if you work in jazz, if you work in reggae, if you work in soul, R&B, or, old school R&B, you want to do quantizing as little as you can get away with. You want to use quantizing basically just to shift timing where it's noticeably out. And so you might manually move things. But if you're working in pop, hip hop, contemporary R&B, and styles like that, then yes, you want everything to be very, very precisely to the grid. For me, that kind of music sounds a little bit robotic, and it doesn't have any ebb and flow that a human performance has. Which is why I like, I like rock music. I like jazz. Obviously, I'm a jazz musician. I like old school R&B. I like old school soul, Motown, that kind of thing. None of those records were ever quantized. Nobody quantized anything on those records, and they sound amazing. If you were to take a performance by a great drummer, one of the most recorded drummers in history, like Bernard Purdie or Steve Gadd, and you just quantized everything that they did, it would sound awful. It really would. You would have their drum sounds, but that's all you would have. You wouldn't have their nuances. You wouldn't have their groove. You wouldn't have their pocket. And that's, to me, what makes music whack. What makes music danceable is that it has ebb and flow. It has a pocket. And when people talk about pocket, they talk about this kind of distance between right on the beat and a little bit late. Like in jazz, you want to play a little bit behind the beat. You want to play a little bit late, and that's how you get that swing. Swing is not metronomic. Swing is a little bit late. It's not an exact, first part of a triplet, last part of a triplet. It's not exact like that. So it's a little bit kind of not quite that. It's like a little bit late than that last part of the triplet. Or if you play European jazz, it might actually be a little bit early. But for the most part, North American jazz, that swing is a little bit looser. It's a little bit tighter in Europe, because it just is. It's just a different musical culture. That's kind of a little related subject, but this is why input quantize can be really useful in that it can tidy up a performance as you're performing. The weakness is it just moves notes to the nearest grid arbitrarily, and that might not be what you want. So you're still going to have to do some editing. So I hope that answers that question. It's a great question, though. I really like that. Great question. Let's see. So, Rock Tease, I hope that answered your question. Just Bob says, I would like to record my guitar on 2 channels at once without splitting my guitar cable and using 2 inputs on my interface. Record one clean and one with Ampire. Is this possible? Well, it is kind of. You would have to basically create 2 tracks, 2 audio tracks in Studio One, and then you'd have to have them share the same input. And then you would put Ampire on one and a clean on the other, or just nothing on the other. So you could, in theory, do that. But yes, they would have to have the same input channel. So if I was to go and press T here to get a voiceover channel or whatever this is. So let's just say this was guitar. So if this is guitar, I can change this channel count to 2 and have the same input available, right? So I'm using input left. So my guitar is plugged into input left, and I've got 2 guitar channels. And now I can select this. Now I've got 2 channels using the exact same input. And what I can do is I can record enable both of them, and then I can put Ampire on one of these and then leave the other one completely clean and record both these channels at the same time. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these from input left to input right, because that's my Rhodes, and my Nord rather, and we will treat the Nord as if it's an electric guitar. And we will go and grab Ampere. He says not being able to spell because Ampere begins with A. So we'll put Ampere on this one here. And what should we use? Let's use something clean. We'll use American Phase on there. Why not? And then the other one is just not going to have anything on it. So now I'm not monitoring these tracks at all. Let's see. Maybe we could actually change this so it's got a little bit of distortion. Let's choose something that's maybe a little bit. There we go. So something like that. So let's mute our little arpeggio thing that we did with Lead Architect, and let's. Did I have this set to 1? Yes, I did. That should be set to 2. There we go. All right, that will do. Complete, utter crap for the most part. But what we can do now is we can deselect all of these. So that's my clean. That is my distorted. All right, so there you go. Just Bob. You can record using one input on 2 tracks, put Ampere on one, keep the other one clean. There you have distorted and clean. And you can do what the heck you want with those. So we could pan those opposite. So now I've got my clean on one side and my distorted on the other. So there we go. Hope that helps. And Rock is happy with his answer as well. Says makes perfect sense and will suit my rock style well. There you go. Awesome. And Just Bob says thanks as well. Perfect. And yes, that kind of was a little bit reminiscent of Money for Nothing. Yeah, that was kind of what was in my head, actually. No. I'm just looking through the chat. Billy Morgan says, mind reading coming to a Studio One version near you. Stay tuned. Plus members. Yes. Telekinesis. Studio One, the telekinesis update. That would be cool. Let's see. Oh, la 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 la. I'm trying to go through the chat here. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Kyle says, or duplicate the track after recording and apply Ampere. Yes, you could certainly do it that way. I think doing it this way is maybe the old school way, kind of like just creating 2 tracks and record on both tracks at the same time. Yeah, it means you don't have to do all that duplicating and putting Ampere on after the fact. You've done it up front. But yes, there is another interesting thing you can do. I'm going to close this song. I think I may have shown this some time ago. We'll just go and grab another new song. And it's been a while since I've done this one. But let's go and do T again. And this time we'll only do 1 track. And what we're going to do here is we're going to open up the mixer. And what we're going to do is we are going to close that panel and that panel. And we are going to grab splitter, the splitter tool here. I'm going to drop this on here. And then on one side, we're going to put Ampere. And we're going to put another Ampere on the other side. So let's go Presonus Ampere. We'll whack this over here. And then we'll do another one. Ampere. And we'll whack that up there. All right, so now we've got 2 Amperes. So let's edit this one. And this one, again, we will go lead. We'll go British Blue on this one. And then on the other one, we will go... I don't know. Let's try that one. So I'm just making this up as we go along here, guys. And so what we're going to do is we're going to... And that's giving us a bunch of feedback. Which one is causing all the feedback? That's the next question. I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the splitter and I'm going to not do that. I'm going to turn that one down. Let's see if that causes the problem again. All right, let's not monitor it. Let's just record it and play it back. So let's get this back on again. Sorry about the feedback there, guys. I forgot to put the pre-count on. Ah, I know what's causing the problem. I'm an idiot. I'm on the wrong flipping input. There we go. Fixed. All right. And the idea should be with slightly different sounds, and maybe this could be There we go. So effectively now what we have is by using the splitter and putting two different amplifiers on, we're recording one guitar, one track, two different amp setups, which now creates a bit of a wider guitar sound. So now we've got a little bit more of a kind of faked stereo guitar sound, and it's a mono track, but we're using the splitter to create two different amplifier sounds. So there's another way in which you could record a guitar and have two different guitar sounds just by using splitter. So you could do this either way that you want. So seeing as I've got splitter here, what I could do is I could, can I remove? Yes, I can remove. So I've now got amplifier on one side and clean on the other. So if you wanted to do clean and amped, you could just use one input and use the splitter, put amplifier on one side, no amplifier on the other, and instead of using two tracks, you're just using one. So there you go. You've got like two different ways of doing it. In fact, I think we've got three because Kyle suggested one. So method number one, two tracks, one without amplifier and the other one with amplifier, or use the splitter with one track and put amplifier on one side and nothing on the other, or method three, which is to duplicate the track and put amplifier on after the fact. So the choice is yours, whichever way round you want that. Rob T says he's having a little trouble understanding the pre-count setting. You're talking about pre-count in here? Basically, it just counts. It's like a count-in. So you notice I had this set for 2 bars. Basically, when I record, let's get rid of this recording. If I have this set to 2 bars, it will give me 2 bars of count before it starts recording. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. Now it's recording, or at least it should be if I'd record enabled everything. 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Now it's recording. Okay? So that's how pre-count works. It's literally just a pre-recording count. That's all it is. It's not more complicated than that. So you can have this checked, or you can have pre-roll, which is a different thing altogether. That basically, pre-roll is really useful if you have to, if you have to record in at a specific spot, because you want to correct a mistake made and you want to punch in a mistake. Well, you can set this up for 2 bars of pre-roll. And basically what it'll do is it will give you your count, and then it'll give you pre-roll before it actually starts to record, so that it will start playing back before it actually starts to record. So pre-roll is really, really useful. It gets you to hear a little bit of context before you actually start recording. So pre-roll can be very, very useful. But if you're just starting from the very beginning of your song, pre-count is going to be the way to go. Gives you 2 bars of count, and then you start to record. You can change this to whatever you want. You can change that to 4 as a maximum. or 1 as a minimum. Some people like just 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, record. Some like me, I prefer 2 bars. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because I'm a jazz guy. That's kind of how I learned how count-offs work. Now, you've got this option here that says repeat accent. So, if we were in 6/8, it says there, if you hover over it, play 6/8 click light 2 times 3/8. And this would be the case for 12/8 as well. So, let's test that theory. So, let's change this to 6 and 6/8. And we will get rid of this recording. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the metronome settings. I'm going to put the metronome back on. And I'm going to do this repeat accent. And then I'm going to close that. And I'm going to do my counting. Can you hear where that accent is now? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So that's what that play accent does. It's very, very useful. So this will work if you're in 12/8 as well. So if you put this onto 12/8, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. All right, so works just the same. So that's what the little play accent thing does. Very useful. Let's put this back into 4/4. And normality should be resumed. And it is. All right, so that's how that works. Go back over to the lounge for a minute or two. So, Rock, I hope that answers that question. Good question. Yeah, that's basically pre-count. That's what it is. It shouldn't be any more complicated than that. It's just a pre-recording count. So before you start recording, it gives you a count so that you know where the pulse is so that you can start recording. Okay? Pre-count is really, really useful. Back in the day, when you were recording to tape, you would record a click track. And you would record that to the tape for the duration of however long your song is. And so you would always have like you would always agree that there'd be 1 bar of count or 2 bars of count before the start. And so, or 1.5. So what you would do is you would have a complete, if you're in 4/4, you'd have a complete 4/4 bar of count, and then the first 2 beats, and then you'd have 2 beats which are silent. Why do we do that? It makes it so that it's very easy to cut, so that you don't have the click at the start of your finished production, because you don't want that. You don't want people to hear a count in or a click track at the start of a song. You don't. So that's what they did. So I've done a lot of work in the film industry as a session musician for film scores, and that's how count-ins are done. It's either done with the conductor or with a click track, and you'd have like a silent couple of beats. So, if it was in 4/4, 1, 2, he would count in 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And those last 2 beats are silent, and then the orchestra starts. And it just means that it's easier to just lop that off when the recording session is all done and you don't hear the count in at all. So that's how that works. Rock says 66 years old and still learning. Never too old to learn. Nobody is ever too old to learn. We got 23 people here. We got 20 likes. So we're very, very close to that like parity that I like to have. So for those 3 people that are here and are watching and haven't hit the like button yet, please do. I would like it if you did. I would appreciate it if you did. That said, though, if you don't like what I'm doing, that's fine. I don't hit the like button. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions because we got like 15 minutes left of the show. Kyle says new Magic 8 Ball plugin. Shake your PC and get a different sound. That's funny. Official getting started is here. I don't know who you are, but you are new to the channel and I'm glad you're here. Welcome. And this person says, I've never really messed with sends. What's something I should know about sends? Sends are very, very cool. I can show you how you can create a send. It's easy enough to do. Let's go back over to... So here's our guitar track. And I'm actually going to record something into this again. Hang on a minute. My chair is stuck. Something like that, why not? That will do. Alright, so now we've got that. Let's say we want to send this to a delay or something like that. Or let's say we wanted to send, let's say we wanted to, yeah, let's just do this with a delay. So we'll use analog delay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to this send section here, like that. And that automatically creates a send to a return effects channel. And then what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go for analog Pong. I'm going to turn the feedback down a bit. And we're going to go full width. Now, it's a little bit overcooked. It's a little bit too much. So all the repeats of the delay are getting a little bit swallowed up. Or rather, the original signal is getting a little bit swallowed up by the repeats of the delay. So we can adjust this by adjusting the send level. So now we're sending just a wee bit. Now, if you're sending to something like a reverb or a delay, and you can do this with multiple channels. So let's imagine we have, 50 Fender Rhodes, 50 guitars, 50 vocals. Rather than putting a reverb plugin on each one of those individual channels, you can just put a send on here and have the one delay. Okay? So you can have the one delay channel, the one return, which is this effects channel here. And then each one of your channels in the mixer has a different value, a different send amount. I can show you what this looks like on on another song. So let's go and open up this song, for example. And so this is a completed mix, and you'll see over here, I have one analog delay and I have two reverbs. And if you look across here, you'll see some of these channels they've all got sends to either an analog delay or a hall reverb. Or in the case of this lead vocals bus, we've got an analog delay, we've got the room reverb, and we've got a sidechain compressor, and the sidechain compressor is basically ducking the delay a little bit. Is when the vocal has signal going through it, when this lead vocal bus has signal going through it, it's basically compressing the delay a little bit. And then when the signal stops, it opens up the delays a little bit, and it stops the delays getting, the original signal swallowing up the delay a little bit more, but it also allows me to send a little bit more to it without getting it all swamped in delay repeats. So I can have the amount that I want, but then I can use a sidechain compressor to basically turn it down when the vocal is performing. Then when the vocal is not performing, those repeats come back up, which is a neat little trick that you can do. So that's what these sends are for, and it means that I don't have to put a reverb or a delay on every single channel, because if I do that, the channel count starts to get high. But not just that, rather not the channel count, the plugin count gets a little bit high, and the more plugins you have instantiated on a single channel, the more that will start to overload a single core of your CPU, and then you'll start getting things like dropouts, pops, crackles, clicks, all of that kind of stuff that you don't want to hear. All right, so I hope that helps with that question about sends. That's a really good question, though. Russell Harris is here. Hello, Russell. Good to see you. Welcome to the show. He says, hey, Jonny and fellow subscribers. Hello. Good to see you. Welcome. I hope you're enjoying the show. We've got 9 minutes left of the show, folks. So if you've got a question, please do get it into the chat. Start your question with @Jonny Lipsham Studios, and then that will help me pick out your question from the general chat, and it'll make it easier. Excuse me. It will make it a lot easier for me to basically see your question. Let's see, Official Getting Started says, that was epic, thank you very much. The extra channel popping up kind of confused me, but that makes great sense. Yeah, basically the effects channel is the return of the send, because you have to have a return, otherwise you're not going to hear any effects. So that's what it does. Sends to it basically comes from the old analog console days, which is where I kind of got my start. I got my start on an SSL console, the 4000E console, many years ago, way back, probably in the late 1980s. I was working on this SSL console. I was a kid. I was only like 12, nearly 13 years old, and so the mixing engineer who was in the studio was very glad for me to assist him. I started off by asking questions, and then it followed on from then that he said, hey, why don't you do this? So I did a couple of menial tasks for him, and then eventually I just started doing more and more, and he started doing other things. And then eventually I was actually doing my own mix sessions on the SSL. So what that meant was, if we had things like outboard compressors like LA2As, or 1176 compressors, or we had outboard reverb and delay units, if we wanted to send, for example, a vocal through a reverb, it basically had to go out from the console into the reverb unit, and then from the output of that reverb unit back into the return channel on the desk. And then you would turn up the return channel until you could hear the reverb. And then it was a case of you just blended the original with the reverb channel, and there's like a send knob control, pretty much like what we have in the mixer in Studio One, where we have the sliders. Well, on an SSL you have an actual little mix knob, control knob, and that basically adjusts the amount that's being sent to the reverb unit, and then how much you get back through the return. And so that's basically what the effects channels do in Studio One. They're designed to be the effects return from an in the box reverb, inside Studio One. So if you do have outboard gear, you can use things like Pipeline, or you can, if you've got a patch bay, and if you've got enough audio inputs and outputs, then you could connect all sorts of hardware gear up to Studio One. There's a plugin called Pipeline, which also helps to connect Studio One with outboard gear, but you don't necessarily need to do that if you've got enough inputs and outputs. So if you do have, like my friend Dave Vignola has an SSL Origin console, which I think is 36 channels. I think it's 36. Might be bigger than that, but I think it's 36. Plus he has a whole bunch of outboard EQs, compressors, reverbs, delays, all sorts of stuff. And he has a lot of inputs and outputs. And so he can easily, run these things direct into the mixer, and then print them back into Studio One, which is kind of how he works. Please don't forget to type at Jonny Lipsham Studios at the start of your question. That's really important. Otherwise, I'm less likely to see it if there's a lot of chat going on in the chat. And I don't want to miss your questions. Fortunately, tonight, there's not a whole lot of chat going on, so it's a little bit easier, but please do remember to do that. Official Getting Started says, you kind of misspelled the name wrong there. That's probably why it didn't highlight in red. He says, what's your favorite macro tools you use? I use, I don't actually use that many macros. I use some, but I don't use lots. There is a third-party product made by my good friend Lucas Rashidska, and it's called Harmony Wizard, and it enables you to create chords, to create harmonies, and it's basically for virtual instruments, so for MIDI. So if you are wanting to create chords and you're not really a keyboard player, then Harmony Wizard does that. But there's a whole macro toolbar specifically for Harmony Wizard. It's very, very cool. I highly recommend you go and check it out. One of my mods will post the link to where you get Harmony Wizard from in the chat. It's extremely cool. It's I think it's about 30 something, 40 something dollars US. But it's extremely well worth it. It's very, very sophisticated. It has a bunch of very, very clever features. Well worth investing in. And so I use the macros that are available there, but there are some macros that I use that are just really, really simple. Like, for example, the zoom to loop macro. This one is one that I use all the time. So, for example, in this song, if I just close the mixer, I actually have a loop zone set up here. If I click on this button here, it zooms Studio One. I'm going to just shifty that up a wee bit. It now zooms Studio One to within this loop range. Okay? But there's a whole bunch of macros here that I also use as well, like the plugin manager. If I click on this guy, it just opens up the plugin manager. And so if I need to update my plugin list, let's say I've just installed a brand new plugin, then I can click on this guy and it will scan It'll scan all my plugins, and then all my plugins will just appear. Any new ones that I've added will just appear. And what that does for me is, instead of scanning on startup, which is basically a feature I've turned off, it's on by default, but you can turn it off. And what that does is that it means that Studio One no longer scans your plugins at startup, which makes the startup for Studio One go through a little bit more quickly. Instead of it taking maybe 2 or 3 minutes, for me, it now takes a matter of 40 seconds, maybe less. Depends if I've had Studio One already kind of operational at some point throughout the day, and then I've closed it, and then I reopen it. If I reopen it, it's like 15 seconds. It's very, very quick. So then if I purchase new plugins, which I don't do very often, but when I do, if I do that, then I just click on this guy and I update the plugin list. And then there's the song folder. This basically just opens up your song folder in Explorer or Finder. This is useful. This turns off all your effects. So let's open the mixer, and then let's click on that, and it literally turns everything off. So this is a good way to completely A/B your mix, completely dry. And it will sound very, very different. So if I just drop this into here. When everything's against me, my back against the wall, holding all the words, God's, and that's without the effects on. I'll stand and shout, no holding back. Do or die, gonna do. All right. So that's what that does. That's very, very cool. And then there's all of these, how you can name tracks and channels by selecting these. And then there's this. This is like literally the action menu for literally everything. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of available macros here. Like event effects, add space delay, or copy to new layer, hotkeys, mirror notes, various musical functions like setting velocities, that kind of stuff. So there's absolutely loads of stuff in here. And some of these are all part of the Harmony Wizard, by the way. Like add power chord above the melody note, add power chord below, arrange chords from chord track for full orchestra, arrange chords from chord track, full orchestra with low bass. So yeah, there's loads of stuff there. And then I've got the Harmony Wizard toolbar, which comes with Harmony Wizard. I've done a little demo on Harmony Wizard, but check out Lucas's YouTube channel, because in fact, if you follow that link to the s1toolbox.com/Harmony Wizard, there's a bunch of videos there that Lucas has done which demonstrates how that works and why you should purchase it. It's not a case of maybe you should think about it. No, you should purchase this. I'm a musicologist by qualification and by trade. So I am definitely a music theory nerd and a music theory buff. It's kind of what I do. It's one of the ways in which I work for Presonus. I'm a Presonus employee. I work in software for Presonus, so I'm working with Studio One, and my specialty basically is to do with the score editor and also Notion 6 and Notion Mobile. Those are the products that I am particularly very heavily involved in, but I work in different parts of Studio One as well. But, Presonus makes use of my musicology brain quite extensively. So it is kind of part of my job. So, I technically don't need Lucas's Harmony Wizard because I know how to create very complex, very advanced chord changes and harmonies and stuff like that, and orchestrations, because I do that all the time. Because, you know, I also write film scores for student films for the film scoring, the film production program at Edinburgh Napier University. So I work with those filmmaking students, and I do their film scores. So I don't need Harmony Wizard, but I have it because it's really, really useful. Very, very helpful. Especially when I'm doing film scores and I'm having to work very, very quickly, I can use some of the Harmony Wizard tools just to get things mocked up quickly for whomever the director might be that I'm working with. So yeah, Harmony Wizard, essential purchase in my opinion. And no, this show is not endorsed by Lucas, nor his product, but it's a great product, and I think you should get it. And it's an extension for Studio One. It's fantastic. All right, we are pretty much at the end of the show. Neil Thompson says, sounds like a 70s jazzy, funky jazz type of thing, yacht jazz. Oh, you're talking about this song. When everything's against me, my back against the wall, holding all the words, cards I feel 2 feet tall. Yeah, this is my song called "Dig Myself a Hole," which I wrote and produced and released. 2020, I think it was. Back end of 2019, I started recording it, and then I released it, I think, early on in 2020. It's a fun little song. It was inspired by something that the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson, said, which at the time I just thought, man, that's just hilarious. And so it inspired the entire song. And so I thought I would make a kind of nice little rhythm and blues thing with some horns and stuff. And it's got a fake guitar solo on it. It's not a real guitar solo. It's a fake guitar solo using my Akai Iwi back in the day when my Akai Iwi actually worked. It currently does not. And if you're wondering what an Iwi is, it's an electronic wind instrument. It's basically shaped like a clarinet. And I have it set up for saxophone fingering, and you can basically play it like a saxophone. But it plays various synth sounds, and one of them sounds, you know, pretty decently like a guitar. So that's what I did. So that's that song. What bass did I use? For this song, I used my fretless bass, which is at the back of the studio there. That's my Fender 1962 jazz bass. And I basically got rid of the fretted neck that came with it. Well, I still have it. I just unbolted it, and I bolted on a fretless neck for a much more contemporary fretless jazz bass. Let's see. Just Bob says, I see videos about tape emulator VSTs to give your music a lo-fi tape sound. Doesn't Studio One have a tape emulator in it for us to use? I forgot where it is. It is. If you have the Retro Mix Legends, which if you are a member of Studio One Pro Plus, you have access to, just download, install them. But if you don't, if you're not a member, then if you have purchased them at some point in the past, then they are basically, there's this extension called Mix Effects, and the Retro Mix Legends, the CTC1 and the Console Shaper are all part of that. And the one that you might be referring to is called the Porta cassette. I'm just going to quickly show you this, and then we'll wrap up the show. And this is what it looks like. And it's pretty cool. Now, one of the cool things about this is you can actually pitch it down. Okay? Now, there is another way in which you can do kind of tape style stuff, and that is in the track inspector for time stretch. You can set this to tape resampler. Now, if you set that to that, and then you do something like a tempo change, for example, not only does it slow or speed up the tempo, it will actually adjust the pitch, just like what would happen on tape. If you speed up tape, the pitch gets higher. If you slow down the tape, the pitch gets slower. So if you wanted to simulate a tape slowing down, if you put this into tape resampler mode and then do some tempo automation so that it slows down, that's what you'll get. You'll get that very cool kind of sound. So if that's kind of what you're after, that's another way in which you can do that. That was a recent addition to Studio One version 6. I think that was done in 6.5, as I recall. So there we go. That is the end of the show. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm sorry if I did not get to answer every question there, because there were definitely a good fair few that I didn't get to. Just simply because we kind of ran out of time a wee bit. But all that to say, thank you very much, everybody, for your questions, and thank you for joining me tonight on tonight's show. We had an absolute belter. There were some really great questions there. Gert, he says, how to set device block size for keyboard 256 and voice 512 per track. I don't think you can actually do it on a per track basis. Those kind of device block size things are global settings. So they are global for, kind of how your interface worked with your computer. So, but that said, if you play with your device block size settings, you can find a happy balance that maybe works best with analog and digital sources. So virtual instruments and analog microphone and, instrument inputs as well. Just find a happy balance that works best for you. And if necessary, use the dropout protection as well. And make use of that green Z, because that green Z will reduce some latency for audio and instruments as well. So for virtual instruments as well. So you can adjust both of those. And what that does is that basically means that your recording path, it splits the audio engine into two, playback and recording. So you don't need to worry about latency on playback. You need to worry about latency for recording. So with the dropout protection, when you arm the track to record, it puts that track into the record engine, and it has its own monitoring path, its own latency monitoring path. And you can set that essentially independently. And so you can have this really, really low latency and not worry about the playback engine at all, because the playback engine doesn't, latency is not a thing. Latency is only a thing for recording. So use the dropout protection, use that green Z, which is software low latency monitoring, or you can use the hardware low latency monitoring path, which basically means you are monitoring directly off your interface. And that will give you 0 latency when you monitor off your interface. The downside of that, no effects. So you won't hear a reverb. You won't hear a delay that you have on the channel if you monitor exclusively off the interface. Okay? I work like that. It doesn't bother me. I don't need to hear reverb. I don't need to hear a delay because, I just don't. It just doesn't bother me. So, with that said, we're at the end of the show. Billy Morgan has set up an after show Zoom. So if you want to come and join us over there, we will finish up our continue our conversations over there. So just follow the link that Billy Morgan has posted, and I will see you on Wednesday for a very special episode of Songwriting Simplified. I will hopefully, if everything works well, hopefully I will have Rich Cresswell joining me on the show for a for an announcement, which I think most of you may have already caught because it's been announced in Studio One Pro Plus community and also on Facebook. So you probably already know about it, but we're going to cover it in much more detail on Wednesday. So hopefully I'll be able to get Rich on the show then, and we will talk about the Christmas Songwriting Challenge. There we go. All right, folks. See you then. Good night.